there. Let's continue with verse 34. We're still in chapter 5 of Matthew, and we're going on to verse 34. But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou cannot make one hair white or black. But let your communication be yea and yea, nay and nay. For whatsoever is more than that, more, you go beyond saying yes, yes, or no, no, whatever goes beyond that is evil. And interesting that the scripture actually says, whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. So let's talk about swearing. Now here we're not talking about using cuss words, right, and profanity. We're talking about taking an oath. We're talking about making oaths, making in this case, when you're swearing, that oath is more than likely something that is done in vain. You know, you've heard people, I swear if such and such and such and such, I'm gonna do such and such. Well, do they really mean that? And so God is saying, Jesus is saying, in other words, don't have such useless babbling. When you communicate, say your yeses are yeses. In other words, be direct, and your no is a no. No hemming and hawing, because in James the scripture says a double-minded man, a double-minded man is unstable in all their ways. And usually when a person is swearing by this or that, I swear I'm going to do such and such. It's usually pretty empty, number one. But why don't we want to do that? Because none of those things, whether they be a city, as is mentioned here, Jerusalem, another person, or even by yourself, as the scripture says, you're not. Don't swear by heaven or hell, because it's not yours to make a claim for. It's not yours to hinge the proclamation on. In other words, you can't swear by heaven because heaven is not yours. It says that's God's throne. You can't swear by, the city in which you live or the country in which you live because you don't own it. You couldn't, if you defaulted on your oath, could you give them that city? Could you give them heaven? If you defaulted on your oath or your swear, could you then make your hair white or black? In other words, you in all of your doings, you can't change those things. So let your conversations be straightforward. You say you're going to do something, say it and then do it. Yes is yes, and if you mean yes, say yes. If you mean no, say no. Because anything more than that, the scripture says, cometh from evil. In other words, is deceitful. Anything more than a yes or yes and a nay or nay or no or no is deceitful. And there's a I think they're in one of the I want to say it's in Shakespeare or somebody, and they say the phrase is, the lady doth protest too loudly. And the meaning behind that was the person making all that noise, in this case swearing, is overreacting, right? Is going beyond what they ought to be doing. Usually, if you ask someone, did you take that cookie? Did you take? And they start just, ranting and raving. Oh no, cookies! What are you talking about, cookies? Well, they probably did take the cookie, and they're, causing all that ruckus to be deceitful, to to steer you away from the issue at hand. And you find that in the arguments done today, if you listen to many people when you ask them the question, listen to our politicians and some other folks when you ask them the question, they never really answer the question. They go along on these long explanations on something and never really directly answer the question. So the guidance here is to be direct. Let your yes be a yes and your no be a no. And these are guidances, these are commands from Jesus. We don't often think of them that way, but they are. And so then, verse 39. But I say unto you, we're again in Matthew 5, still in chapter 5, verse 39. But I say unto you, that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. Now, let's just stop right there. We want to go to 40 and 41, but let's just stop right there, because the inclination of most people, if somebody comes up and physically slaps you, right, punches you in the face, your response is you want to punch them back. But this is talking about turning to him the other one also. Oh, so you hit me over there? Well, hit me over here. And it's not necessarily speaking of the physical aspect of that statement, although it could be. But there's another scripture that says, don't give an answer to everything. In other words, everything doesn't require a response. So in this way, we could see that don't answer everything. Somebody wants to argue with you about something, maybe it doesn't need a response. Maybe it doesn't need a retaliation, a comment. And if any man sue you, in verse 40, if any man will sue thee at the law, take you to court, and want to take away your house, your car, all your possessions, let him take away the car, and let him give him the house too. Because you're going above and beyond here. And this is what I meant by Jesus's commands and Jesus's comments when he said that I did not come to destroy the law, but to fulfill the law. And I said that many times, if we look at that, he's amplifying, he's extenuating, he's adding to, he's um, further defining. So in this sense, we can see that just plain as day. If any man sues you, they're suing you for one thing. I'm going to sue you for $1,000. You hit my car, and I'm going to sue you for $1,000. Don't just give them the $1,000. Give them the whole car. Because if you do that, you're done with it, right? That person, you can't be bothered by that person anymore, or that business, or that entity, or that neighbor, or whomever. And then the next one even further amplifies this idea, verse 41, and says, "And whosoever shall compel thee to go 1 mile, go with him twain, 2 miles." Uh, what is that saying? Don't just go. Don't just do the minimum. Go beyond the minimum. Amplifying. Go beyond the minimum. If your neighbor asks you for a cup of sugar, why not just give them a whole bag of sugar? Or a box, or whatever they come in now these days. Container. Two cups. Because just like yourselves, and many of us are guilty of this, when you ask for 1 cup of sugar, you really want 2. Or in other words, when you ask for $5, you really probably need 10, but you're going to say, well, I'm going to only ask for 5 because that sounds like a lot less of a, inconvenience. or more than likely, when a person comes to you and asks for something, again, remember, as I mentioned, they're usually when a person, by the time a person comes and asks for something, it's usually when they're just really, really in dire straits. But they figure, well, I'm only going to ask for $5 because I know if I ask for 20, they're gonna look at me cross-eyed. So if somebody asks you for 5, give them 10. Somebody asks for a cup of sugar, give them 2. Somebody insists that, in this case, and they were speaking again of that culture where everybody walked and, you know, whereas we drive a lot more today. If somebody says, come on down to, such and such with me and help me pick out a car, well, plan your whole day to be with them, not just that hour. Give more than what is asked. Verse 42, give to them that ask of thee, from him that would borrow of thee, do not turn them away. This is going back to what I said last night about giving. If you have it within your means to feed someone, clothe someone, house someone, maybe you have some rental property, maybe you have some a vacation home, maybe it's sitting vacant. Someone's out of their house for some particular reason, eviction, burned out, flood, whatever. If you have it within yourself to give, and maybe all you have to give is time, then it goes back to verse 41. Don't just go 1 mile, go 2. Don't just spend 1 hour, spend 2 hours. If that's all you have to give is time, then give the most that you can give. If someone would ask from you, do not turn them away. Now right there, many of us we're already done for. If someone asks that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. But we do it every day. And some of us maybe even boast about doing it. And then verse 43. Ye have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But what does verse 44 say? But I say to you, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you. And pray for them which use you despitefully and persecute you. That's not our inclination. Somebody does us wrong or we feel like we've been offended. First thing we want to do is retaliate. And we certainly, under our breath or in our minds, have cursed them in one way or another. Here the Lord is saying, love your enemies. When they curse you, when they revile against you, argue against you, bless them. Pray for them. Do good for them. Why? Because in verse 45 he says, that ye may be the children of your Father. In other words, when you do good to those people that despitefully use you, you are claiming your position as a child of God. You are following Jesus. You are loving God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, because you're doing as your Father would do. Many times we talk about, we see our children do something and we look at them and you say, oh, you can tell he's such and such his son. Well, why can you tell? Because they're doing as their father or as their mother. She sure laughs like her mother. Why? Because that characteristic, that behavior is indicative of the Father. Are our behaviors, do your behaviors, does your speech sound like a person that follows God? Do your behaviors demonstrate? In other words, if someone was looking at you, would they know you were a Christian or trying to follow God?